Welcome to Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast, a Mentalis Academy production. Let's learn more about ourselves, inside and out.
So, hi, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast, the Inside Out podcast, where we talk about all things related to any topic on mental health. And today, of course, we have Nedzin, who is my co-host.
Hello again.
And today we have Catherine Thomas, who is joining us from Ottawa and who will tell us a little bit about herself and her topic for today. Hi, Catherine.
Good morning, Daniela and Nadine. I'm very pleased to be part of this podcast. And just a little bit about my background that has me wanting to be part of this podcast is I have a background in working in a mental health facility for quite a number of years. And added to that is my background as an HR professional. So some of the topics that Nadine and Daniela discuss with me are of great interest. Especially of interest is one about emotional triggers. And when I think of emotional triggers, I think of people pushing my buttons. But I often wonder, how do we manage them? And why do we do it? Why do we act so quickly before we think about what's happening? Why don't we slow down?
I think you started it fair enough saying people, but it's not just people. Sometimes it's things, sometimes it's places, sometimes it's noises that kind of triggers on our buttons. Yes. And the reaction is very instinct. It goes like fast to trigger us in our emotional reactions. Sometimes it's because of things that happen to us or things that have been association we've made to those people, thoughts, ideas, places that kind of gets built up inside of us. And then sometimes one thing happen and then we blow.
Nadine, are you saying that sometimes it could be some sort of, I'll use the word feeling, that resurfaces from something that's happened to us in our past? Say we were in a traumatic accident and all of a sudden that sound could be an emotional trigger.
Absolutely. That can be an emotional trigger, sometimes trauma, sometimes even just growing up, something that has happened repeatedly to us, or something that has marked us intensively and we haven't processed it yet. So, what happens is our brain goes directly to that particular place and we react in the same way we did or we couldn't do in that particular moment. But we do that in the actual present moment.
So what do you mean when you say we haven't processed it yet? Does that have an impact? Or what impact does that have?
Daniela, you want to say something there?
Yeah, so when we haven't processed it yet, what it means is we haven't yet made the link cognitively, if you will, or even processed the emotional part of it between what the trigger is and what our reaction is. In other words, it's purely emotional and we haven't yet figured out why we're doing what we're doing.
Uh-huh.
So once we have the capacity to figure that out, then we have the capacity to almost put a pause button between trigger and emotional reaction. And at that point, we can self-regulate. And here we're talking mainly about emotions that are strong emotions that are triggered. As Nedzin was alluding to, it can be both positive and negative. Like some associations are quite positive. So you could think of, I don't know, your grandmother's apple pie that you loved so much. And then you're walking by a bakery and you smell apple pie and immediately you're flooded with these feelings of love and warmth and whatnot. And so it could go either way. It doesn't have to be negative. The other part that I wanted to say is the reason they're so immediate is because we have to understand that emotions were there initially, like our entire makeup, our entire psychological makeup was meant to help us survive. So the trigger bringing immediately to an emotional state was originally there to make us survive. If the sight of a snake triggers fear, you're much more likely to immediately run away from the snake, which could otherwise bite you. So now the problem is that often our emotional triggers are misplaced, meaning they were there initially for a good reason, for a trauma or for something that happened to us, and then they just get translated into things that really shouldn't or are destructive to us to have that emotional response. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I'm back to what I started with. So how would I manage that?
To manage that, as Daniela said, and I would add another part of it, we need to start, for a start, we need to be aware that we are triggered. And by that, knowing that our emotion in facing that particular event or incident that happened is exaggerated. It's not appropriate. Me passing by that bakery and having that smell and buying all the pies might not be a healthy response to that, even if it's coming from a good place. So there is this part of awareness that, oh, my reaction is not, the intensity of my reaction is not appropriate to the incident itself per se. Because we might have intense emotions to an intense event, which is totally appropriate. So it starts by being aware that we are having this big emotion for something that, if my neighbor has music like loud at once a week, this my reaction might be exaggerated towards that. So it starts by awareness. As Daniela said, we need to know again what triggered it or why we are having this emotion. We might go to understanding how it happened, how we got it built up. And for me, what I would add is we need to know how to regulate our emotions. Once we know it is a trigger, it's coming from here, what do I do with it? But as Daniela said, once we know that it's coming from somewhere, it gives us this space, kind of a buffer between the incident and the instant reaction of it.
So what I'm hearing is that's mostly negative triggers, because the positive triggers you almost want to, like when you are in your car driving and the radio comes on with your favorite song, it makes you happy, right? Is smelling, getting an apple pie aroma, it makes you happy. Those are, and you look forward to those triggers in a way, like seeing fireworks. Oh yeah, I'm going to go to the fireworks. It's a happy time. But the negative ones, to me, when you feel like you have no control over an emotional trigger, it's almost like, what are the steps for me to slow down and be able to, it, it, I'm trying to link back to Danielle. It's like the fight or freeze or flight. Like, to me, if it was me and getting personal about this, I would almost freeze if it was something significant and strong. So, how does my brain cognitively say, okay, calm down? It is a trigger, so that if I was in the same situation, I would be able to manage it. I know I'm overusing that word manage, but to me, when you have those negative triggers, some are easy, right? Somebody could push your buttons because they say every time you wear blue, you look like the blue man or something. No, I don't. You get defensive, but it could be something significant.
It is, and you started with it, and you've mentioned how I freeze. And for me, this is where it starts because you have awareness of this sensation of I'm freezing. And it goes by how can I get myself to have some movement and some movement because when we freeze, for me, I mean, I would call it with somatic. So me for movement for me is might just be able to blink, might can I just move my jaws, can I just wiggle my fingers? So just be able to create that movement that kind of creates the message for my brain that, okay, and then some awareness of the space. This is where I am. It's I'm not that back there. What can I do? So this is what I how I see it. And I know how Daniela.
Yeah, and I think I want to touch on something you said earlier, Nedzin, because I think it's important and it's often in my way of viewing things, it's something that I tend to skip over quite quickly, and I shouldn't. And that's the recognizing where this is happening in your body. Like you said, Ned's in the freeze, or like you said, Catherine, I freeze. Okay, so I would tell you, what does it feel like when you freeze? What is happens? Do your eyes fixate on one point? Do you stop moving? Does your breath get really shallow? Because that's the first step in recognizing what you're feeling at the moment, and then being able to say, oh, I'm freezing right now.
I understand that. So if I do all that recognition, then what do I do to, I'm going to use the word support myself cognitively and emotionally so that the next time I'm in that place dealing with a thing or a person, that I react differently, that I can say, okay, I've been here before, I froze. I'm not going to let it control me.
Our brain kind of likes to build structures. So when we build a structure in a certain way, which is I freeze, in reaction to this trigger, I freeze. And the trigger can be sometimes something we can identify fast, sometimes not. So by creating this space to allow ourselves to pause, and I'm hesitant with the word pause because sometimes it's not like really pause, it's going fast, but just being able to see, okay, this is what's happening. And then to allow ourselves to create a different path in our brain, meaning I can move my shoulders. Even, I mean, it's like moving the focus from what's happening to what's happening and how can I change what's happening. And in result, the brain also will create a different pattern of, oh, I can change that. It's not instant. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes practice. But eventually, your brain kind of feels, oh, yeah, this is the trigger. I can act this way, or I can have this way, which is harder, but I can have that.
So it's almost a pathway that you go through the experience and then I'm going to use the word self debrief to understand the trigger and the emotions you felt and to try to figure out the why of what happened so that we can understand it and then possibly prevent it from happening again. But control it. No, not prevent it, but we can control it. But we need to understand it first, is what I'm hearing.
Go
You
ahead.
need to understand the emotion and what happened, and and you'll know the trigger, right?
Definitely the understanding is a part of it. Now, the caveat to what you're saying is it also depends on the intensity of
Yes.
the trigger or the response. Because let's say like you've had some really traumatic event happen in your life, it's going to be very difficult just on your own to be able to do that. Like that sounds to me that's more like something that you have to get some help, some therapy for, because having the therapist there, one, will help you to see what's actually going on, but two, will also co-regulate with you until such time as you can regulate it yourself. So it depends on the intensity. If it's something like, I don't know, a friend of yours or somebody has done something to you, and then the friend says something that triggers that emotion again in you, that negative response, that's probably, unless it's something really traumatic for you, that's probably something that you can say, hold on a second, what's happening here? What am I feeling? I'm feeling very angry. Why am I feeling so angry? Oh yeah, because the last time I invited my friend to lunch, she skipped out on me at the last minute, and now I'm feeling that she's doing the same thing again. Let me take a minute. Let me just breathe. I know this is a trigger for me. So, how much of this is really what she's doing? How much of it is just my reaction to these types of events? And then you can regulate. But in all cases, the idea is you need to be able to recognize it, what's within you, and you need to be able to take that. And it's not really a pause, but it's more like standing outside yourself and looking at the situation, which sometimes you can do yourself, but other times it's just too much. You need the help.
I like that answer. I really like that response. And I wonder if for those people listening, is it fair, both you and Nadine have a therapy background, to say that these triggers are on a continuum? And as you explained, it could be this and it could be severe. And in recognizing the trigger, and sometimes we need support. So it's not that it's always the stepping outside and saying, oh, okay, I can do this. I'll react this way in a different time or whatever. But it's to recognize that we're not alone, that we can seek out, and we should seek out professional support, because emotional triggers are not like pushing an elevator button.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would say that a lot of people tend to feel badly about themselves if they can't self-regulate, and then it becomes even worse, because now not only are you unable to self-regulate, but also now you're beating yourself up for it. And whereas in fact, like, there's no shame in it. Like, sometimes the trigger is just too great and you need help with it. That's all there is to it.
And I would wonder if sometimes you think nobody's been through this before, nobody's experienced this, or that you've defined yourself as, well, it must have been my fault. I was weak. It was a weak moment. Negative emotions. Because sometimes it's hard to get to a point to say, I need help. And to me, it's a strength to say, maybe what's going on emotionally, I need some help. I think it's both a strength. I think it's a strength to be able to, and it's courageous to be able to say that.
I totally agree. And it seemed so easy when we just talk about it. Yeah, recognize that what's happening, link it. But it is very hard because when we are going through it, it's taking all the place, it's overwhelming. So, yeah, we're giving like kind of tools, but those tools are not that easy to put in practice as well. Being able to recognize what we're experiencing takes a lot of self-awareness, of mindfulness, I would say, of being humble also to accept that, oh, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm experiencing, and how can I get through that? Because sometimes in our defense also we get so protective of what's happening and we overprotect ourselves in exaggerating that. So yeah, they are tools, but they are not really easy to put in practice.
And I would add to that that sometimes we don't know. Like, we seriously don't know what's going on within us, because we all have blind spots. And so we can't see what we can't see. And that's where having someone else and getting the help really sheds light on those areas. And like Nedzin said, it does take courage. No, actually, you said that, Catherine. It takes courage. Nedzin, you said it takes humility. And it's true. It takes both those things to say, I'm not perfect, none of us are, to be able to say that out loud and say, I don't know everything about myself. There's the humility. And then the idea of, I'm going to bare my soul to somebody to help me. That takes courage.
And the idea of a blind spot, I think, is significant, because you're right. It's like the three of us could look at the same picture and walk away and see three different things. And it's really hard to look within yourself sometimes. And especially if you're being triggered by some sort of emotion. I'm using the word weakness again. It's, oh, I'm doing it again. I'm frozen, like I'm stuck. I'm literally stuck, when it it could be something else that you're not seeing.
I think there's a lot you can say about that, like just that topic alone, like the idea of not knowing why. I'm doing this, but I have no idea why. I'm reacting this way, but I don't have any idea why. And it's harming me. Like, it's me from moving forward. Like in your case, when you said stuck, I think a lot of people can identify with that. But what does stuck mean? Stuck means you're not moving. You can't move forward. You can't move backwards, sideways. Like you're just stuck where you are. It can be very limiting.
Hey everyone, we hope you are enjoying this podcast. Want to find out more about this topic and much more? Check out our courses at Mentalis Academy. Find out more at www.mentalistacademy.com. And now, back to our podcast.
I'd like to bring up just an example, an HR example. Often I have, in my experience, been interviewing people who have, I'm reflecting on a couple of people who have literally frozen in an interview with fear. And afterwards, you could see the sweat and the emotion, and their body movements were, this isn't me. I know the topic. I know what you want, and all of this. And I'm just saying this, if there's any HR people out there, I think it's important to recognize that those people could be going through some sort of a trigger. And I'm not a professional in this area, but of maybe fear of failure, fear of failure, of answering the question, of not getting the job, of any number of things. And I think as an HR professional, if you were to recognize that those emotional triggers can happen in the workplace, that's where I'm coming from. And maybe there's an opportunity for HR professionals to have just a little bit of a little more EI, sorry, emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, to help those people not be able to address it, but be able to, in the moment, be able to get past it. Because we're not professionals to address it, but we can help them get past it in the moment.
I agree. Just by acknowledging that person is freezing and
Yeah.
is scared or whatever. You may not want to give them titles, but like just, oh, I can see you're sweating. It's a recognition for what they are experiencing.
Yes.
And it's a way, I've been seen in this. And it's okay. Do you need a breath? Do you need to take a moment? Just acknowledging that and give them the space to regulate as well.
And Nadine, I agree with you 100+%. Again, in my HR practice, at some point I matured, let's put it that way. And I did that, and myself I learned, and the change in the individual was unbelievable. And part of me said, why didn't I recognize those triggers in another human earlier? And then it was an awareness to have that in my toolbox so that I could hopefully support someone if it in my professional world at a lower level than the work that both you and Daniela do.
It's amazing because in my opinion, it takes the relationship from a professional authority to interviewer one to a human one. Oh, I can see you, and I can
Yes,
see you suffering, and that
yes,
people can relate to.
yes, yes. This may be a bit off topic, but it's almost to me that act of human kindness, human acceptance, which it doesn't get much better than that. It's a great starting point. And if you recognize someone else's fear and being interviewed, and all of a sudden and then they open up, it's amazing. I'm going to tell a very short story. I had a situation like that, and I'm not going to say the whole story. The individual is now currently is a director of a department in the company that he applied for about 20 years ago, and he fell apart. And, you know, just by saying, what you said earlier, it looks like we need to take a break, acknowledging a trigger.
That's a great example, Catherine, because I think it illustrates the opportunities that can be missed sometimes when we jump to snap judgments or when we don't take into account the person's humanity. You have no idea what people are going through. You have no idea when somebody's sitting across from you. Like, is this his fourth interview that week? And have they all gone terribly wrong? Does he have a new baby on the way and he's worried about like how to make ends meet? So this is like his last chance. Like you have no idea. So it's very, or does he have a dying family member that's also on his mind? And by having some of that humanity, like you showed, it just goes to show that at the end of the day, that could very well be the right person for that job and then some. It's a question of retaining some of that in your mind or in anyone who's in HR, actually, because I think part of the issue there is that sometimes like the roles get a bit cloudy. You're supposed to be a gatekeeper and at the same time retain your humanity.
So when we talk about understanding emotional triggers, it really isn't only about us. It's about our community. I'll use that word. And our community could be different at any time. And with those we interact with, maybe we're the trigger. I don't know. I don't know, but I think the key word is understanding. And we're not alone. Anybody, a child could have it in our interaction, a family interactions, say, or something in a playground or something. You never know. But I think the key word might be understanding, and maybe exactly what you said, by thinking before we continue the interaction with them, it might be helpful for both individuals. Yeah.
I would add to that creating a safe space,
Yes, that's it.
because sometimes we are the trigger. And of course, we can be triggers for lots of people by just being who we are. We don't know what we trigger with others. And sometimes you are triggered. And I like what you said, community, because sometimes we don't see it. As Daniela mentioned, we have those blind spots. We don't know if we are being triggered or not. Sometimes it takes somebody from the outside, but we need to trust that this person is coming from a good place for us. So I find having this safe space allows us to feel less threatened. And then again, to be able, oh, okay, I can let that come in and reflect on it instead of being on the defense and trying to protect ourselves all the time.
Nadine, I like those words, we can let that come in, that sometimes when we're being triggered, to just allow it to happen in the moment and almost trust ourselves in that space and say, okay, maybe some recognition will come out of it. I don't know.
Even when we know, I know sometimes when I'm triggered, yet I know I'm triggered. And sometimes I have the energy to deal with it. And sometimes, like, I know I'm triggered today, let's finish the day. So there is that recognition, there is that safety. I think that needs to be there, that if I'm triggered today, my community can be with me. And then what can I do with it? What do you think, Daniela?
That's absolutely true. And not only that, but I would also say that the nature of triggers, of emotional triggers themselves, are such that if they're no longer triggering us, they're not triggers anymore.
Yeah.
So if something is triggering us, it will trigger us. The idea is that then what do we do with it? And Nedzin, you were alluding to, sometimes we can handle them and sometimes we can't. And we just say, okay, I'm just I'm triggered. I know I am. Something's up,
Yeah.
but I can't deal with this right now. I have to get through my day. Fair enough. The important thing is just to be, I guess the key word is awareness, like just to be aware of what's going on without necessarily putting a constriction on ourselves that we somehow have to deal with it, fix it in the moment, done, checked off the list, because that's not realistic. That's not going to happen. There's always going to be something that triggers us because that's the nature of triggers. Once something stops triggering us, then it's not a trigger anymore, but there'll be others. Do you see what I mean?
And could what both of you have said, can you almost translate some of that to what stresses us out?
Sure.
Just could, because it sometimes stress is a trigger, and then it,
Mm.
you've had enough.
My definition of stress is feeling like you have all the responsibility and none of the control.
Okay, all right.
So when you're being triggered constantly, it's that you're feeling like, I feel like something's being put upon me, but I have no control over it because it's triggering me. Therefore,
Yeah.
I can't control it. Yeah. So with that one on top of the other, that's stress. Absolutely. If you're, I don't know, if you're working somewhere and your boss is constantly triggering you, there's something that the way he or she assigns tasks or whatnot, or that's really triggering. It leaves you feeling very ill equipped for what you have to do all the time. And therefore, it affects your self esteem and whatnot. And it keeps happening over and over again. And you feel like there's nothing you can do about it. There's stress.
And sometimes you get along fine with your boss, but you've had a long day, you've had several incidents in your day or in the last week, and then they come up and they say a word, and that word triggers you. Yeah, there is a big part of stress in that. I agree.
And if I extend that to a really stressful day at work, and then you are with family or friends, the least little thing will just trigger an emotion. I've had it. That's it. That day, baddie. That's it. I'm out of here. And sometimes it's the family and friends that can really help de-stress you, and you don't recognize it. And to me, sometimes to slow down and think before we act, especially with those people that are close to us. We sometimes we try to do everything ourselves.
Because it's family, sometimes we feel entitled also to, we know
Yeah.
they're here, so we let some steam off. But
Mm.
I agree, it's not on them. It's on us to be
Well,
able to allow them.
at times they're a trigger.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, and it. I think most of us have more than one person in a family, even if it's two, and that one person is the big trigger. To take the time to say, why is it that person really gets my fur up, or why do every time I see them, I go, "Oh, my breathing just, I can't do this again." It's back to understanding and recognizing and slowing down and getting outside of ourselves and maybe getting some extra help. None of this is easy, is where I'm going. It doesn't matter where you are. You could be on a sports team and you lose a game because in the middle of you blame yourself for losing a game because in the middle of it, Mary didn't kick the ball to you, and Mary never kicks the ball to you. And why doesn't Mary ever kick the ball to you? And
Yeah, it is
it's
emotionally
life.
and yes.
It's life. And as Daniela says, we're all human.
It's utopic to think that nothing will ever trigger us. Maybe if you're a Buddhist monk and you've been practicing this for eons, but even then, I could be surprised if nothing. I think they would likely say they are triggered, they've just learned how to work through it.
And let's be honest, a Buddhist monk is living in a monastery far away from everyone. So if he doesn't get triggered, we can understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. He's
Everyday
probably
situation.
not even talking to anyone.
Have their own thoughts.
Yeah, emotions are complicated, they're tricky. they were put there for a good reason initially, to have us be able to go towards things that were good and stay away from things that are bad. But in our complex society with its complex structures and its interface between people, it can get complicated sometimes, and it is important for us to understand what's going on within ourselves.
Mhm.
And I say, yeah, it is complicated. Is it is heavy, but it's what makes us alive as well. Because if we don't have anything that's triggering us, if we go with that on life without having anything just to try to control it, what are we living exactly?
And how are we gonna learn about ourselves?
Back.
You know, if we're the same every day and whatever. You need to have those difficult interactions to become a better human.
Yeah, because without it, like it's discomfort that makes us evolve and change.
Yeah.
Without
Yeah.
comfort, we would just be in a constant state of stasis.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, you like to push somebody's buttons. I enjoy it. Who's on my list? I think we should acknowledge that we too can play a part in the negative side of emotional triggers for someone else. But yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting too, actually. If we do that, is to ask ourselves why.
I know. And is it meanness? Is it bullying? Is it enjoyment? Because it could be someone you really like, what pushes their button, their trigger, but it could be not nice. Yeah, and it could be bullying and being unkind and yeah, and just some people like to see people scared, for example, and then they laugh at them. So you never know.
You never know, and it's also interesting to think what else it could be, right? It's a cry for attention. Maybe it's retaliatory for something that the person isn't even aware of.
Yeah, or maybe their ego is so big that they have limited, I won't say no, because how do I know? They have limited respect. No, I don't want to use the word respect, but understanding of, even human nature. Like they have no empathy, no sense of emotion. They just, so what? And they walk away without that understanding that how hurtful it has been to another person.
It's when it's intentional, I find it's very different also. It can be playful, as you said, or it takes us to a different kind of situations. Yeah, acknowledging that as well is very important, as Daniela said.
Catherine, do you feel like we've answered some of your questions on this
You-
subject?
I think you've answered a number of, you've answered the question that I posed in the beginning, but I think we've explored it from a number of vantage points that I think I can go away and do some synthesizing and digest the conversation, and I have a better understanding of emotional triggers and why do we do that? What can we do about it? Can we do something about it? Do we want to do something about it?
Excellent question.
That being said, I want to thank you, Catherine, for doing this.
You?
I know it's always hard to be on the hot seat and have to come up with questions, but I think a lot of the things that you mentioned today are things that most people wonder about as well. So I think it's really useful that you brought them up.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you, Nadine.
Pleasure.
See you next time. Find out more at www.mentalisacademy.com.